Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining in. We have people from 32 countries joining in. That's one of the advantages of doing online events is we get an opportunity to basically bring in people from all over the world. Physical conferences do have some limitations from that regard. So there we go. There is a hello from Brazil. Great to see that. So let me quickly welcome Anne-Marie to deliver the opening keynote for the Appium conference. So it's a real honor to have Anne-Marie. I had the privilege of meeting her in person last year in December. We sat down, we had a lot of interesting conversation. And when I was thinking about who do we invite for doing the opening keynote, I was like, it has to be Anne-Marie. She's got such great experience. Of course, her book that all of you might be familiar with, the quality coaching book, quality coach book, sorry. Again, it's been such an inspiration for a lot of people in the testing space. Anne-Marie also did a keynote for us I think it was Selenium 2020. Uh, just at the beginning of the pandemic when we were still figure out and getting the online events, you were kind enough to do the online keynote as well for us. So again, thank you for all the amazing work you're doing. I know you're playing a very critical role at Telstra, the telecom company in Australia. Had an opportunity to also discuss some of those things with you. So it's like very, very amazing what is going on. And so love to hear more from you. So with that, handing it over to Anne-Marie. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Naresh. Look, welcome everyone. Today, we're going to be looking at what Dune can teach us about software testing. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have watched Dune or read the books, but Dune is a sci-fi set in the future. There's a massive empire. There are houses, right? There's the House of Atreides, there's the Harkonnen, and there are corporate structures like the Space Guild, which is in charge of all travel within the universe or the galaxy and the worlds. And then there are also the influencers. Now, these are not Instagram-style influencers. These are political influencers. So Dune has got it all, right? And we've got the protagonist, Paul Atreides, son of Duke of Leto, Lady Jessica, and they're from the House of Atreides, and they live on this beautiful, lush, green planet called Caladan. And I actually my mind has just gone blank, so someone put in the chat to let me know if I got that name right. But they're an influential house, almost too influential, right? They're on the ascendancy of power. Now, Lady Jessica is Paul's mum, and she's what's called a Bene Gesserit. And the Bene Gesserit, these are the highly powerful influencers and advisors to the house and the emperor. They're kind of like the neck that turns the head. They have the ability to see the future, and plus they believe in this thing called this prophet called the Kiswas Haderach, who will save all of humanity. They even have a breeding program to ensure this outcome. And Paul, the son, is the result of this breeding program. And he too has a little bit of ability to see into the future. They're the goodies. Now we've got the Harkonnens. Now they're clearly the baddies. They wear black, right? They are the stewards of Dune at the opening of the movie and the books. And that's where they mine spice. Now, spice is used for time travel. It's the most important mineral in the universe. It's the equivalent of petroleum for their time, right? Spice is mined on the planet Dune. The Fremen live in Dune. Now, the Fremen are not a house. They're more like a tribe. And they have adapted their ways in living to Arrakis, the planet Dune, and which is really arid, harsh, brutal land. There's not a lot of water there. All right, so you're with me so far? Cool. Now, I actually think that Dune is like one big enterprise organization. You're with me, right? You can see it, right? There's fiefdoms, there's turfs, there's, in enterprise, people have little mini houses. They have their patches and they got their budgets, which they're given, and they're trying to maintain their budget. They're trying to influence as much as possible and have power just so that they can get their work done. And there's also people working behind the scenes, right? We've got people who might not be the official leaders, but they're kind of influencing people in the background. And often these leaders will go to these people for advice. And of course, you've got different leadership styles. You've got, on one hand, you've got a very autocratic type leadership, really top down. And on the extreme other end, you've got maybe more of a servant leadership type person. And also I've noticed, and this is a recent thing, that there's actually a lot of change happening in enterprise at the moment. We've seen the ascendancy of tech companies, their ability to be really agile and respond to customer demand and customer needs. And the enterprise, well, they have to compete against that. And that's not something that they can do easily. They're not known for their agility. They're not known for their ability to change rapidly. And so enterprise are having to respond to that by slimming down. And you'll see this in numerous layoffs and redundancies in enterprise organizations, hacking of budgets, the need for really the express need of time to market and lead time are becoming so critical to enterprise, and they're measuring these things because they need to get more agile in their response. And what's the spice of enterprise? I don't know. I'd love to see some answers in chat what you think here. What is the spice of enterprise? Well, I was tempted to say Jira, honestly, but I think it's automation. And you know what they say? They who controls the spice controls the universe. Why do I think it's automation? Because automation opens up so many doors. I've noticed how it's opened up doors in terms of budget. And if I wanted to drive any change, I just need to mention and measure the change in terms of automation coverage. So it's a powerful thing that changes things within enterprise. What about software testing? Okay, well, we're kind of a mix. I think we're the most like the Fremen. We've adapted to harsh conditions and we respond to what's happening around us. But we're also part Bene Gesserit because we have to really influence people around us without having that formal recognition. The role of test manager disappeared quite a while ago for most of us. And, we don't have that formal recognition. We don't have that place at the table. So we have to seek outcomes through influencing other people. And this is so true in quality, isn't it? When you think about, we can't actually make quality better. We have to work with engineers to fix bugs. We provide them information on the state of quality, but we don't actually necessarily have the ability to change that. In some situations anyway, in most situations for most people. Look, I was a little surprised about my recent decision about a year ago to take up a role in enterprise. I don't see myself as a political player at all. And I tended to work in scale-ups and startups. So I was really just surprised by my decision to take on this role. But when your boss says to you that part of your role is you're going to be like the Bene Gesserit and see change throughout an organization, I mean, how can you not say yes? How can you not say yes, really? Now, if you're a fan of Dune, there are multiple interpretations of Dune. We've got the Frank Herbert books at the start. We've got the David Lynch version, a little bit odd, in my view, but some people love it. And then there's the current Denis Villeneuve, plus another few series here and there. There's so much to learn from Dune. And I think everyone has takeaways from Dune that are very personal to them that they take away. So today I'm going to share you some of mine. I'm going to focus on three things: shaping change, leadership, and influence. Now, I have to say, riding a sandworm in a desert, to me, that's the ultimate symbol of change. I think we are not in Kansas anymore. For leadership, I chose the picture of Muad'Dib. Muad'Dib is that tiny, tiny little mouse that lives in the desert. It's adapted to very, very harsh and rugged climate. And those big ears that they have, they're used to capture moisture. And when Paul Atreides chose this symbol as his symbol, the Fremen were really impressed by this because it was a sign of humility for them. And finally, of course, we have to go to the Bene Gesserit for influence. Now, as I go through my talk, these come up during the film, in and out. They weave throughout the film. And perhaps you could be thinking about these themes as I tell a few stories about working in enterprise. Change, heaps of change in Dune, like the simple things. They go from the planet that is beautifully green and lush to a really harsh desert, right? So you've got an environment, a symbol of enormous amount of change there. But there's other changes that are happening in Dune as well. You've got the political upheaval, right? So the House of Atreides is on the ascendancy, and that is upsetting the balance of power. The Emperor and the Harkonnens get together to scheme up a plot to bring down the House of Atreides. And so throughout the books and the movies, you'll see this plot evolving where they going to Dune, the House of Atreides going to Dune is an actual trap. And they kind of know it's a trap, but they have to do it anyway. They feel like they've got no options. And so they go to Dune. And then there's the Harkonnens come back and they destroy the House of Atreides. And so you've got all this change happening. And spoiler alert, at the end of the whole thing, Paul comes back and he actually becomes emperor. So you've got this up and down, shifting and changing of power throughout the movie. And then finally, there's Paul Atreides himself, right? Now, he's a 16, 17-year-old spotty kid. And yet his mother thinks he's going to be the prophet that saves humanity. No pressure, Mum, right? He's not sure about this. Now, because he's got a little bit of foresight, he can see into the future, he sees that this role of being a prophet isn't necessarily a great one. He takes thousands and thousands of people to war, and the pictures are not pretty. And so he has this internal conflict within him about whether he really, really wants that role, whether he really wants to be that person, that type of leader. In software testing, we're constantly dealing with change, right? To some degree, we can almost anticipate some of the change. We become really good at identifying risks. We know that from the moment we write a strategy or we think about how we're going to test, it's probably going to be out of date. So there's going to be late delivery times. The software is probably going to be delivered later than anticipated. There's probably going to be more bugs in the system than we actually had anticipated. The test environment that we were planning on is suddenly not available because some other project has taken it over, and we have issues with test data. But we kind of know all this stuff, right? We know how to sort of deal with it. It's one of the reasons why we don't really like to estimate really tightly, because we know that there's going to be a lot of change happening and that we need to be able to deal with that. I've become really adept at dealing with change because of this. I suspect many of you have too. That's one type of change, but there's also the change we can't control, right? These ones tend to be not quite so nice. Like, for example, a couple of years ago, half my team was made redundant. That was a change I had zero control over. I had no agency. I had no idea that was going to happen to my team. And it was at that sense of powerlessness when I was going through that change. And then, of course, when I started in enterprise, there's that change too. Like, I'm suddenly trying to drive change at scale. This is massive. And I know it's a difficult thing to do because of the thousands and thousands of people who work there. Now, the actual role that I had been given was that I was basically in charge of the test automation tooling team. It's a team of 40 software engineers, awesome engineers, who basically create, maintain, and support the tooling for about 5,000 software engineers within the organization. But that wasn't the only change that I was asked to do. I was asked also to be a change agent. What exactly I was meant to be changing, I didn't really know, but I knew it was in the area of quality and software testing. Now, I've been in this role a lot before, so I'm kind of comfortable. I know what to do. I know the process. I know that I need to go and basically start poking around, talking to people, and finding out exactly what's going on before I start making any kind of big strategy or decisions about what should change. And so that's exactly what I did. And I started to see, unsurprisingly, because there's always gaps in software testing, right? I started to see some gaps. Now, these gaps were not necessarily a surprise to anyone. Everybody knew these gaps existed. And they're the typical ones. There was a lot of tech debt, a lot of legacy systems. And these legacy systems were being migrated into a more modern architecture. And because of that, there's a lot of complexity to deal with and a lot of dependencies that were probably not really realized or people weren't really certain about. And so it was unsurprising that there were some pretty large, heavy systems integration testing type phases happening. And the releases were taking longer and longer to happen. There was lots of silos, no surprising, it's enterprise. And also there's that massive dependency on process that you typically see in enterprise as well. You're like, we cannot move forward unless we have a Charrett ticket. So this was nothing new. Everybody knew that this existed. But what I observed was happening was everyone was trying to fix testing. Everyone was trying to reduce the testing time and try and fix that. Now, I have this belief that software test engineers are the most awesome people in the universe. I don't know. Yes, I'm slightly biased. But I really believe that software test engineers have to do an amazingly difficult job. Often is underappreciated, but it's difficult. And in order to be able to deliver that value, it's hard work and it's often not totally realized. And I believe that most test engineers are absolutely doing everything they can in order to do in the environment that they have. And so what I suggested was that rather than focus on fixing the testing, that we focus on the architecture, we focus on the software that's being developed and whether we can actually prevent bugs before they actually get into systems integration testing. But I was a bit hasty. I didn't fully understand how enterprise worked. I hadn't fully grasped the culture. And I tried to push and drive this change by myself because I was so used to working in scale up that you would just go and do it, right? And I found myself setting up workshops and pushing agendas, regardless of the semi-polite suggestions that I do it a different way. And people got confused. They were like, well, what are you trying to do? And why are you trying to introduce exploratory testing and running bug bashes? Why aren't you focusing on tooling? Isn't that what you're supposed to be doing? Honestly, they had a point. And the temptation was to take a step back and retreat and focus on what was safe, the tooling bit. But I knew I had the skills and the capability to offer real value. And besides, I love this type of work. And so while I didn't have an official mandate, and I also knew that my boss wanted me to do this. Did I mention I have a great boss? Well, I went to her and tried to get some advice about what I should do. And she suggested that I collect all the gaps, I collect the gaps and the suggestions, and I document them and present them to senior leadership with a list of potential experiments that could take place in order to be able to drive some change. This worked like a treat. It worked really, really well. And I got a mandate to have some experiments running to be able to try some ideas. The second thing that she advised was that I should collaborate with my peers and really work to achieve the same outcomes. Out of that discussion, a modern testing strategy was born, a collaboration between my peers and myself on what possibly the future of software testing could look at the organization. All right, time for a clip. So in this next clip, Paul is going through a test of humanness. It's the gom jabber, for those who know the movie. Now, on his neck, there's a needle full of poison that if it goes into his skin, instant death. His hand is in a box. If he moves his hand out of the box, he's going to get stabbed by that needle. Jessica, his mother, is outside the door. She's not allowed in the room. But she understands what he's going through because she's been through that before. All right, fingers crossed that this video works. Here we go.
Silence.
Fear's the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings obliteration. And I'll face my fear, not permit it to pass over me and through me. Where the fear is gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain.
Enough.
I love that final look of defiance on Paul's face. All right, lost sec. All right. So, like I said, when I went to work at Enterprise, I needed to face some fears. I needed to face the fear that I wasn't going to be successful, and also that I'm not necessarily a political player. Like, I don't feel like I really have that ability to play the game. I tend to see people at their face value and take their word for it. So I was definitely nervous going to work into Enterprise. But as I was trying to shape change, I was also facing other fears. Now, honestly, I'm not the most assertive person in the room. And when I meet conflict or resistance, I'm kind of reluctant to deal with it directly. I don't really enjoy conflict, and I prefer to work with people than against them. And the people who I was working with, they had fears too, right? If I was going to come in and start working on strategy and start working on driving change, what were they going to do? And there was that fear of potentially losing influence or even status. And everyone knows in enterprise, these are important things. They have implications. And in software testing, it can be quite fear-driven. Like there's this fear occasionally, I don't know if anyone else has felt this, but this lack of recognition, there's this underlying hum of, the desire, the need to be recognized because it's so hard to see the nature of our work. The fear of not quite being good enough because, well, we're not a developer. And of course, that fear of losing our jobs because we're not seen to add value. To me, like, these are all really valid fears that I might not be feeling every day, but certainly it's an underlying current that exists under me. And most of us, I feel, have these fears. So what can we do? Well, of course, we need to be like Paul, right? We learn to live with our fear, to observe it, and then not be controlled by it. That's kind of easier said than done. Adrienne Marie Brown, in her book Emergent Strategy, talks about intentional adaptation and the idea of an intentionally moving towards something rather than reacting to a fear. So what can that mean for us in software testing? What can we do about this? Time for another clip, right? I want to give you an example of intentional adaptation. Now, this is really early on in the movie. They're still on planet Caladan. The Duke of Leaftoe is trying to prepare Paul for Dune. Now, I've got to apologize for the subtitles. Well, apparently they're all blurred anyway, so it probably won't matter, but these subtitles are terrible. So don't worry, you're not missing much. The spelling's chronic. Anyway, here we go.
I need you by my side. When we get to Arrakis, we'll face enormous danger.
What danger? Fremen? Desert?
Political danger. The great houses look to us for leadership, and this threatens the Emperor. By taking Arrakis from the Harkonnens and making it ours, he sets the stage for a war, which would weaken both houses. But if we hold firm and tap the true power of Arrakis, we could be stronger than ever.
What does that mean? Mining spice, keeping the Fremen in their place? We'd be no better than Harkonnens.
No. By making an alliance with the Fremen. That's what I've sent Duncan Idaho to arrange. Here on Caladan, we've ruled by air power and sea power. On Arrakis, we need to cultivate desert power. I want you sitting.
All right, it goes on, but we have to stop there, unfortunately. I can't imagine the fear that the Duke must have felt at this point, right? He's going into a trap with his family, the people he loves the most in the world, and he feels like he has no options. But rather than focusing on the fear, he sets out to focus on a vision, a plan, an intent. And he uses powerful analogies to help Paul understand what that vision is. He talks about things that Paul is familiar with: air power, sea power, and then he provides that analogy about desert power and an alliance with the Fremen. I've really discovered that focusing on a vision and a future helps place my energies where they're most needed. So I think it's really useful to think about, well, what are your goals and what are your visions in what you're doing? And do you have clarity on them? I think that's one of the things I discovered by having a really clear idea about where I was going in enterprise. It gave me clarity to be able to say no to stuff that I shouldn't be focused on. And everyone knows in enterprise, there's always way too much to do. So that was an unexpected side benefit of having this vision and focusing. And so it allows me to focus on this vision and experience change instead of resisting and reacting to the change and trying to control it. That modern testing strategy I spoke about was the vision. It was a really powerful statement that outlined why we had to change and how our testing might look differently in the future. It talked of continuous testing throughout the whole life cycle, not just something done by test engineers. It talked about ownership of quality. And it's something that we all collaborated on together, myself and my peers. And then we began to socialize it out. Honestly, this was a mega marketing campaign. Every platform, every showcase we hit. We created multitudes of videos on the topic. We all even offered training, and we had some great responses. gradually the ideas were starting to stick. Now, I also want to touch on the topic of leadership, right? So in the books, and this is not so much you'll see in the movie, but definitely in the books, Paul is not the sole leader. It's a group of leaders with different strengths in different areas that really are the ones that are driving the change. If you think about it, there's Lady Jessica and also you've got Stilgar, who's in the Fremen. You've got Duncan, the guy who's there, the steady rock that gives him support. And of course, the Duke of Leto. And Shani, that support as well from the Fremen as well that she was providing. It was a whole group of people who actually achieved the outcome. And I think this concept of decentralized leadership is really important in enterprise, especially when you're trying to shape significant change. So let's go back to my enterprise story. The modern testing strategy had taken hold. People were loving it, and they were taking it on as if it was theirs. Now, I really would love to say at this point, I was really, really happy, but I wasn't. I had reacted poorly. I was like, this is my strategy, and they're taking it on as if it's theirs. I know it was quite childish. But that fear of not being recognized reared its ugly head. So I went to my boss and I said, you know, I'm not getting any recognition for this. And she turned around to me and she said, Anne-Marie, you've got to let it go. You need them. You cannot do this all on your own. Let them think it's their idea. And after a lot of angst, that wasn't easy, I managed to do that. And I think this is really, really, really important lesson for me. It's something that we cannot drive change by ourselves. But if we're aligned on a vision and an intention, exactly how it gets rolled out matters less. And so it's also not just a once-off alignment, but it's a continuous checking in, resetting, and making sure that you're still constantly aligned. This means it allows people to play to their strengths. Now, my personal way of rolling out strategy is to really work closely with people on coaching, mentoring, offering training, and using the experimentation space as ways of driving change. My peers were very different. They used other ways in order to roll out change. Some of them were way more strategic and roadmap than I could possibly even do, as that's not necessarily one of my strengths. Now, this requires trust in your peers, and also the desire to work to achieve that outcome. But I've discovered that you build trust by offering trust. And I read this book from author Steve Covey about moving at the speed of trust. And that in reality, no matter how fast we want to go, we can only go as fast as the relationships and the connections with the people around us that we have. It's easy to ignore this fact and just keep burning through. But personally, I think this is a mistake. So often in our communities, we burn out. You know, we do volunteer work. I bet loads of you in this room today are doing massive amount of volunteer work, helping each other out, helping, you know, improve the software testing community. If we try to drive change by ourselves, we burn out, because we are the sole leader trying to drive change. Not only is this exhausting, it's also quite isolating. I know, I've done this many times myself. The concept of decentralized leadership allows us to roll out change and, importantly, coast when we need to rest. All right, we're coming full back circle to the Bene Gesserit. They had something called the Mission Protectiva. Now, centuries before Dune happens and the whole story happens, the Bene Gesserit had gone around to all the different planets and seeded prophecies and legends with in all the different planets. Why did they do that? Well, they put these stories and myths in the planets thousands and thousands of years before, in the knowledge and hope that one day a Bene Gesserit would come along and find that that myth legend to exist and be able to influence people on the planet using that myth and legend. They were aware that some myths were going to land, but also some would disappear. I think just like the Bene Gesserit, we need to constantly seed ideas throughout the organization. We need to communicate and connect out as far as we can, and to do it continuously. So often what happens is I will go out and meet people that I have absolutely nothing to do with and have no direct benefit to what I'm doing right now. But I'm always on the lookout for an opportunity where I can help someone and I can actually provide some person some value that may or may not in the future be useful to me. I've also coached my team to become ace at marketing. Everything they do, they need to shout out about it. They need to write posts. They need to go on Viva and shout out the great news of what they've done. I created a podcast within the enterprise organization where I identify pockets of brilliance, of great work that people are doing. And I have a 10-minute chat about what they're doing and why they brought about that change. Now, one more clip. I'm going to finish up with this clip because I feel it summarizes many of the ideas and concepts that James Herbert, the author, was trying to convey in Dune. We're at the point where the House of Atreides is no more. The Harkonnens have come back to Dune as anticipated, and they have obliterated everything. The Duke of Leto, the Duke is dead. And Paul and Jessica are attempting to escape into the desert to try and find the Fremen. And of course, there's a sandstorm.
Jet flares behind us.
The mystery of life isn't a problem to solve, but a reality to experience. A process that cannot be understood by stopping it. We must move with the flow of the process. We must join it. We must flow with it.
All right, I know, like, oh, it's all happening there, right? Look, of course, they manage to safely land, they find the Fremen, and the movie goes on. But I think this final clip summarizes perfectly how we can shape change in an intentional way. There's that learning to consistently let go of our fears and to trust the process and to trust those around us. Trust is built by offering trust. We need to collaborate with people, finding commonality through a shared vision. And the concept of decentralizing leadership, knowing that, yes, we're probably going to have to let go a bit of ownership, but that also knowing we can't carry the burden all by ourselves, and that other people's strengths complement your weaknesses. And who knows, we might even begin to enjoy some of this process of change. I have a huge respect for my peers that I work with. Look, we're really, really different, but we work together and we're making a difference in how we do quality. So I'm actually just going to end up by using this opportunity to say thank you to all of them for helping me on this crazy journey that is enterprise. Together, we've achieved a lot. Thank you.
Great. That was very enlightening. Thank you, Anne, for that. I know we are a little short of time. We have 2 minutes left. So there are 4 questions so far. I'm sure there'll be more questions as we go along. Are you okay for me to jump ahead and start asking the questions?
Sure, sure. Will I stop sharing? And
Yep, perfect.
okay.
So I think we'll start with the first question, which is basically, what leadership style do you prefer? How do you handle giving and receiving critical feedback?
Oh, that's a great one. So I guess my personal style of leadership is that I really believe that I'm there to help the environment, like to help the ecosystem within which people are working. So I think that people are awesome and people are talented, and that often the reasons why things can't get done is because of the ecosystem, the systems around them that prevent them achieving success. And so the way I see it is like, I want to kind of leave the people alone and try and focus on how I can actually, fix things in the ecosystem. But there's also a second bit that I think is really important, and that is helping people have the skills they need to be able to handle change and handle software testing in different sort of contexts, but also then to have the confidence in their ability. I think this is sort of a really big thing for me, is like, people are so talented, but do they actually realize how talented they are? So it's helping people see that talent and helping people tap into that confidence so that they can go out and just do the things that they really want to see happen. I guess receiving feedback. So I've actually had the opportunity, I was very fortunate to actually be coached and trained on how to give feedback. And the concept that, that feedback should always be very specific and it should be actionable. So I'm very careful when I do give feedback that I describe the situation, the context. I describe the behavior that has taken place and the impact of that. So I think it's really important. Feedback is essential, and difficult feedback is essential sometimes. But I think it's really useful if you try and sort of use that approach and you sort of make it actionable so people know what they need to do in order to act on that feedback. I think I'm good at receiving most feedback. Probably what I work on is actually assessing whether that feedback is valuable or not for me at this point in time. So not necessarily all feedback is valuable. So sometimes you just have to say thank you for that feedback and move on. So
Perfect. I think we're running out of time. So what we'll do is we will move to Hangout and maybe folks can ask more questions over there.